Local radio for local people.
It's all here for you. Traffic and travel. What's on guide. Great songs and great memories on Gravity FM.
Your community, your radio, 97.2.
Gravity.
Gravity FM.
Now, if you're going to the RAF Waddington International Air Show this weekend, you could be going because you want to see the Red Arrows perform, or maybe, like me, you like going around all the stalls and trying to pick up some free stuff, or maybe you could be one of the thousands of people who are going to this event so they can see the Vulcan fly. Now, this is a great honour, because speaking to us now is a man who actually flies them. So, Bill Ramsey, you have possibly the coolest job in the world. You get to fly the Vulcan, which is a plane that, as we'll go into later, manages to excite just about everyone at any air show or event it ever goes to.
Yeah, I'll just correct you. It's not a job. My proper job is in the RAF, but it's a hobby. And yeah, you're right. It's probably the coolest thing in the world.
So this is just something you literally do for fun. You have a job on top of this.
Yeah, in common with almost all. We have 5 pilots and we have 3 air electronics officers. And of those guys, all but one of them have what I'd call a proper day job as well. Yeah.
Okay, so what's yours? What do you do?
I am just about to retire from from the RAF full-time reserve at RAF Cranwell, where I've been a flying instructor for the last 5 years, and before that I was 36 years in the RAF.
What kind of planes do you teach people to fly in?
Currently it's the Grob Tutor, which is the small elementary trainer at Cranwell.
So what's the difference like then between flying that and then getting into something like the Vulcan?
It's absolutely enormous. The Tutor weighs, with everybody in it and full of fuel, around about, 1,000 kilograms, so about 2,000 pounds. The Vulcan, completely empty, without any fuel in it, without any people in it, weighs 100,000 pounds. So it's a big step up, particularly when you land the aeroplane. If you imagine landing the Tutor would be like, say, travelling on a roller skate. Landing the Vulcan's like sitting on the top deck of a double-decker bus, so it's a slightly different experience.
Yeah, sounds it. Just give us some kind of idea of the history of the Vulcan and why it was made and what it eventually went on to do. Okay,
well, the Vulcan was first flew back in 1952. It was conceived as a requirement from the Ministry of Defence at the time for an aeroplane which could carry Britain's new nuclear deterrent as far as far-flung parts of the former USSR. It had to travel twice as high, twice as fast, twice as far as its predecessors, like the Lancaster, which came from the same factory. And that was the competition for the 3 V-bombers, the Victor, the Vulcan, and the Valiant, which in the end, all 3 were built. The Vulcan was perhaps arguably the most successful in that it stayed in service for the longest. So for most of its life, it flew in the nuclear role with a secondary role of what they call conventional bombing, so something a bit less than an all-out nuclear war. Thankfully, it never flew in action except on one occasion, much later in 1982, when a single Vulcan, which was flown by our senior pilot, Squanita Martin Withers, bombed the runway at Port Stanley during the Falkland Islands War, which is the thing for which it's probably become the most famous. It left RAF. The Vulcan left full-time RAF service in the late 1980s, but one aeroplane, X-Ray Hotel 558, which is our Vulcan, was kept flying with what was called the Vulcan display flight for a few years through to 1993, when it was retired. After that, it was bought by a relatively wealthy businessman who was going to keep it for his own collection. It was, if you like, rescued by a chap called Robert Fleming, who had the dream to get the aeroplane back into the air. You can imagine that was a fairly expensive process. And however, over a period of a number of years, he and all the magnificent people who volunteered to help the Vulcan raised a lot of money, and we're talking £7 or £8 million, mostly by public donation, which is still how the airplane is funded. And in 2008, it started flying again on the air display circuit. Since then, getting on for 2 or 3 million people get to see the airplane every year. But still fully funded by public support.
And we'll go into in just a second how people can help that, how people can donate the money. But first, it was at RAF Waddington, was it 2011? And I was there with my dad, and he wasn't, I think he was interested in that he used to be in the RAF, and he was kind of reminiscing about his old life in the RAF.
Yeah.
But he was just kind of wandering around looking at the stalls, and then someone mentioned the Vulcans coming, and he ran over to an area where he could see kind of the display area from all the planes. And as the Vulcan flew over and did that almost, is it actually vertical, or is it just almost vertical climb?
No, it's not quite vertical, it just looks that way.
As it did that, the look on my dad's face was identical to the look on the boy who was stood next to us, who must have been about 10 or 11 years old. They both had that just childhood, boyish fascination. And I think that's something that the Vulcan can do. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are, the size of it, the noise of it, it just is completely mind-blowing.
Well, what you're describing is what people have called the Vulcan effect, which has been noticed since it started flying again in 2008, in that the crowds attending air shows where the Vulcan is going to perform generally tend to go up by maybe 15 or 20% above the historical norm.
So how important do you think it is that the Vulcan stays flying and is able to display to these people?
I think it's really important so long as people want to support it, and that's the evidence that we get from the fantastic level of it keeps coming back to financial support, but that's what we're talking about in reality. If I can give you some numbers, just for a normal display season, the airplane costs maybe about £2 million each year. We burn something over 1,000 gallons of fuel an hour, so from the moment we start the engines to the moment we stop them down, that's costing about £100 a minute. So it's not a small toy, is it?
No, these are mind-blowing numbers. So how can people help you with that?
There are lots of ways. In the first instance, come and see us. That every little helps. At big displays like the one at Waddington, the airplane will be on the ground, so there's the opportunity to visit the airplane for a small charge. There is something called the Vulcan Village, which is full of our merchandise. Or at most air shows, you'll see somebody wandering around the bucket, and if you want to chuck in 20p, then that's fantastic. But for people who maybe don't go to air shows, then if they are interested, then go to visit our website. Just Google Vulcan to the sky, and we'll come up somewhere pretty top of the search list, and have a look. And there are lots of ways to get involved with the Vulcan.
And what's the plan for the immediate future? Is it safe for the next few years, or is it now down to the knuckle?
Because of the huge sums of money involved, it's always kind of down to the wire. We're never in a really comfortable place. This year's particularly important because, as regular Vulcanites out there will know, at the end of this year, the airplane will reach a stage in what's called its fatigue life. So in terms of the kind of aging of various bits of the metal in the airplane, where we will need to do what's called a fatigue modification, if you like, a repair to part of the structure, without which we won't be able to carry on. If we can carry out that repair successfully, then the airplane will probably have round about another 2 years of life to take us to the end of the 2015 display season. That project's called, that repair is called Project 2015. There's a whole fundraising effort being launched for that, and depending on how that goes, which by the end of this season, so around about October time, then the trustees, because the Vulcan is operated by trust, will decide whether or not there is enough financial support to enable them to go ahead with that work. So without that work, the airplane won't fly beyond the end of this year. With that work, potentially it'll carry on for another 2 years after that.
And I think it would just be such a shame if the Vulcan just became another plane behind some ropes in an aircraft museum somewhere.
Yeah, well, in fact, in reality, there are probably something like 15 Vulcans in and around the country at various museums in various states of disrepair. There's one lives outside at the Newark Air Museum, as you might know. But the vision of Robert Fleming and the Trust for the years after the Vulcan has stopped flying is a bit more ambitious than that, because Roberts and the Trust vision wasn't simply to restore and fly a Vulcan, it was to use the Vulcan as a vehicle to inspire future generations of British engineers and pilots and the like. So they envisage a much more active retirement, if you like, for the Vulcan than it simply becoming a museum exhibit.
Bill, thank you very much for speaking to us. You've got, as I've already said, the coolest job in the world, and I'm extremely envious of it. And unfortunately, A, I'm probably not clever enough to be a pilot, and B, it's not really got that much longer in it. We're talking years, aren't we?
Yeah, you probably need to have started training some time ago to come and do it. One of the rules is that in order to fly the airplane now, you must have flown it at some point in the past. So I'm sorry to say that probably counts you out.
Yeah, I think so. At 19, I don't think I was really in a particularly good position to do that.
Yeah.
But Bill, thank you. I genuinely appreciate it. vulcantothesky.org is the website that you need to visit if you want to lend a hand in any way possible, whether it's financial.
Absolutely. And I guess a fair few of your listeners will be at the Waddington Air Show at the weekend. There will be members of the crew on the ground in the Vulcan Village throughout both days. Come and say hello, tell us what you think, and have a chat.
Bill, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Visit our website, gravityfm.net. Local radio for local people.
On Gravity FM.